I can remember when you had to make the pivot, where you went from building hardware and software, and then all of a sudden Apple and Samsung and others came out, and they clearly had economics that you couldn't compete with from a hardware standpoint, and you had to say, we got to change our business and become a software platform and get out of the hardware business. And you had to go out and raise a lot of fresh capital because you were going into a big established market, and you had to be able to invest in the technology. Fortunately, you had a lot of intellectual property that you'd already created that you could build off of. But what was it like to go out and raise capital when you were going out and saying, I'm going to take this company in an entirely different direction?
Well, we saw as we were working with some of these large customers, we kept telling them, stop focusing on the hardware so much, and it's really a software play. Now, what we needed was a platform that was going to take off in massive numbers, and that had just started happening as we were finishing up some of these large hardware contracts. Luckily for us, we saw this happening, and like you said, some of the IP that we'd put in place, in fact, most of it, really had to pertain with our software assets that we had. So as I realized what was going to happen in this, that you either had to jump on the Apple and Android bandwagon, we went out and we decided to raise fresh capital. But because of the systems that we'd built running on the hardware that we created, were totally applicable to the future of running on top of iOS and Android. It was not an easy, as you as a board member know, shift to do that stuff, but it actually worked out quite well. I think most of the investors out there realized how large mobile was going to get, and because we started building our relationships with the carriers early on, and we realized that that was probably the best outlet, because every mobile device now, unlike a PC, has to go through a carrier. I mean, every piece of it touches a carrier. And so with that whole strategy we put in place, the investors were, I think, smart enough to realize what happened. And it might have been a bet for those guys at that point, but it's going to pay off and is paying off well.
So the lesson I learned was that there were moments with OpenPeak where you could have clearly gone out of business, where you could have said, well, we missed the opportunity, let's move on and do something else. But you didn't do that. You said, wait a minute, these are investors who were there with me before and made money with me with storage apps. I know I can make this company successful. And you went out and did things that I didn't think were even possible at moments, where you were raising capital. There were moments where you almost couldn't make payroll, and a few of us chipped in and got you through it. And here we are today. You've got what looks like an amazing success on your hands. Your board loves you, your investors are excited, and yet you were at some very, very crucial moments with your back up against the wall, where you could have folded, and then people would have forgiven you, and you could have gone off and started something else because you'd had a success before OpenPeak. What kept you going? Why didn't you give up? Why did you stay with it? And now you have the success, but it was a lot of heavy lifting on your part to get to where we are today.
Well, yeah, plus it also happened about 2008, 2009, when the world was collapsing out there, which created a lot of distress for some of our investors out there who were supposed to come through with them some parts of this stuff. Two things. One, it was really loyalty to the board and to the investors. I knew we had the pieces to be very, very successful, and I knew we could put together the strategy to do that. So, the whole management team here felt totally obligated, number one, to make this a success for everybody. And we actually never once thought about quitting, not getting this through. I mean, I talk to the team all the time. Failure was just never an option. We knew regardless of what we had to do, we would get it done. And the entire team, which is why I say it's so important to have that team, everybody kept their hats cool and their heads cool, and just literally marched on and did what we had to do. And slowly success starts building. Everybody starts feeling more and more empowered and better about things, and it had a terrific ending.